For more on the implications of this health pandemic, I want to bring on Representative Buddy Carter, a pharmacist and congressman for Georgia's 1st Congressional District. So, Congressman, I want to talk about this bill that's kind of being talked about right now. The Kennedy Center was one of the funding options that was kind of put into this recent stimulus package. Now we see some of your conservative counterparts saying that maybe we should revoke that funding. Do you agree with that position?
Absolutely. Keep in mind now that Nancy Pelosi looked at this CARES Act as being a grab bag for it and tried to get in there as much as she could get in there. She tried to get in there the Green New Deal, funding for that. She tried to get in funding for illegal immigrants for a number of different things that had nothing to do with the coronavirus. We were able to block that, and leadership in the House and in the Senate, Kevin McCarthy, kudos to him for being able to block those things. However, she did get this for the Kennedy Center through. That should never have been there. It's not any more impacted by the coronavirus as anywhere else is. Yet she got that in there, as you suggest, that perhaps because she's on the board of trustees there. But nevertheless, it should have never been in there. And yes, it should be taken back.
And I think a lot of Americans had a problem with this bill early on in the sense that they wanted a clean coronavirus response. They knew that there was an emergency that was an immediate threat to a lot of Americans. It still is. And then it was kind of delayed for the sake of politics, for the reasons that you just laid out, whether it be the Kennedy Center, additional funding for other things. It's just not what the American people wanted during this time. And now we're seeing that there may be talks of a phase 4 bill coming up. And we don't know exactly what's in that, but the rumors have been that it may be a type of infrastructure package. And once again, people are kind of asking the same question. Does this have anything to do with coronavirus? Do you kind of fear that the same thing will happen again if another package does come up?
Well, that is a concern, and I will tell you there are a lot of members of our conference who are very concerned about that. And two things: first of all, they want to make sure and see what develops over the next 2 weeks. A lot of what happens over the next 2 weeks is going to dictate what we do. If it gets worse and we see a spike and it's going to take longer in order to flatten that curve, then perhaps we need to look at it. But it really depends. Not only that, but also it depends on the rollout of phase 3. Let's let this $2.2 trillion roll out, and let's see how it does and what impact it has before we go throwing even more money at the problem. Now, look, there are a number of things I don't like in phase 3, a number of things I disagree with, like the Kennedy Center. However, it was necessary. It does provide liquidity that is so very vital right now to so many small businesses and to Americans.
I think you're right. And I think the whole fact that it was a 96-0 vote in the Senate and then a voice vote in the House kind of demonstrates that this was a very bipartisan bill. It kind of addressed the idea that Americans are in need of relief right now. I mean, even those $1,200 checks, they'll be coming out in about 2 to 3 weeks. That still doesn't go necessarily far enough for a lot of people who are going without paychecks that they were making on a week-to-week basis that kind of changed overnight. So I think to your point, kind of addressing the severity of this situation is right on. And regarding that point, too, do you think that that bill went far enough? Would you like to see any other steps taken by the federal or state governments in order to not only curb the spread, but also help Americans during this economic crisis?
Well, again, let's see how this works first before we jump into anything else. Now, I will say this about a potential phase 4, which again, I'm not going to be in favor of until we can find out exactly where we're at. Sure. But if the president has indicated that he would like to see it go for infrastructure, you can look at that as being an economic stimulus. You can look at that as the next step in helping us get out of this and to rebound. And from that perspective, perhaps it's good if it only includes infrastructure. Now, if the Democrats and the Speaker start adding on and piling all these things in there that have nothing to do with that, then I'm not going to be in favor of that. But if we focus on something that's really going to be an economic stimulus and help us to rebound our economy that has obviously been very impacted by all this, then perhaps we need to look at that.
And before I let you go, too, this has kind of been a wake-up call for a lot of Americans regarding China's actions, not only from the communist government hiding their numbers, but also U.S. dependence on pharmaceutical drugs that are being manufactured overseas. That's kind of been a rising issue. You're a pharmacist yourself. Is that something that you think that the U.S. should address with China regarding the pharmaceutical companies kind of producing their products overseas and having to import them in crises like this?
No question about it. What we found out in the late 70s was that we were too dependent on the Middle East for our oil and for our energy. And we knew and we figured out that we needed energy independence, and we addressed that, and we've done a better job now. We're exporting energy now. That's how far we've come. Well, now we see a situation where we recognize that we need pharmaceutical independence. 90% of all the antibiotics and of the pain relievers that are used here in the United States are coming from China. We've got to stop that. We've got to be pharmaceutically independent. And shame on us if we don't address this once this is over with. And we in our office are already working to address it, to see what we can do to repatriate these companies and these manufacturers back to America, offering them tax incentives, offering them inducements to come back and to manufacture these pharmaceuticals here so that we can have pharmaceutical independence.
No, I think the oil comparison is a good one because, for example, right now Saudi Arabia, Russia, and even Iran are kind of having their own proxy war type thing regarding their oil supplies. And because of the U.S. independence when it comes to oil, natural gas, things of that nature, it's not affecting us the same way that it would have, as you were saying, back in the 70s or even just 10 years ago. It's been an uptick not only from an economic standpoint, but also from a national security standpoint. So I think you're spot on for saying that. Congressman Buddy Carter, I really appreciate you coming on and breaking this down for us. Thank you.
Thank you.